mindset shifts you need to actually build wealth. And we're going to do this by looking at a legendary childhood story, one that honestly totally flips the script on how we think about money, education, and what being rich really means. We're pulling these insights straight from Robert Kiyosaki's iconic book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, there's a reason this is widely considered the #1 personal finance book of all time. It doesn't just hand you a boring checklist of stocks to buy. Instead, it really forces us to confront this powerful underlying dichotomy about money, a divide that literally dictates the entire financial trajectory of our lives. So that brings us to a really fascinating question. What exactly do the rich teach their kids about money that the poor and the middle class just don't? Well, this is the exact question that a 9-year-old boy named Robert, growing up in a Hawaiian sugar plantation town way back in 1956, desperately wanted answered. You see, he and his best friend Mike had just been totally left out of a weekend beach trip by the rich kids. And man, stung by being excluded just because they were poor, Robert decided right then and there he was going to learn how to make money. Which brings us to part 1, a tale of 2 dads. To figure out this whole money thing, young Robert actually had a front row seat to the ultimate financial social experiment right inside his own life. See, one dad, his biological father, was incredibly highly educated. We're talking a PhD, full rides to Stanford and the University of Chicago, and a very respectable, secure government job. Yet, he struggled financially his entire life. The other dad, his best friend Mike's father, well, he never even finished the 8th grade. But he was out there, hustling, building this massive financial empire of stores, restaurants, and warehouses, and he eventually became one of the absolute richest men in Hawaii. So, part 2, mindset, poor versus rich. Now, what's wild is how these two vastly different backgrounds created completely opposite financial philosophies. It wasn't just about the size of their paychecks, right? It was about how they fundamentally viewed the morality of wealth itself. The highly educated, struggling dad, he genuinely believed that the love of money was the root of all evil. But the self-made, wealthy dad believed that the lack of money was the root of all evil. I mean, just imagine trying to reconcile those two totally opposing worldviews at the dinner table, and this split mindset basically bled into absolutely everything. The educated dad prized job security above all else. His go-to advice was always, study hard so you can find a good company to work for. Oh, and he firmly believed his house was his greatest asset. On the flip side, the self-made dad valued total financial self-reliance. His advice? Study hard so you can find a good company to buy. And get this, he controversially taught that a house is actually a liability. He wasn't interested in just playing it safe. He was obsessed with learning how to manage risk. But here is what brilliantly illustrates the ultimate mindset shift between these two men. When faced with something expensive, the poor dad would just instinctively say, "I can't afford it." The rich dad, he outright forbade those words. He insisted on asking, "How can I afford it?" Think about that. One is a statement that acts as a giant mental stop sign. It literally puts your brain to sleep. The other is a question that forces the brain to wake up, exercise, and figure out a solution. Mental laziness leads to financial weakness, while mental exercise actually builds wealth. All right, moving on to part 3, the first business venture. So, armed with this burning desire to absolutely not be poor, 9-year-old Robert and his buddy Mike took action. And this led to a pretty hilarious and highly illegal first business venture. The boys spent weeks scouring the neighborhood, collecting hundreds of empty lead toothpaste tubes. They literally melted the lead down over a red-hot hibachi grill and poured that molten metal into plaster molds. When Robert's dad finally came home, he found the kids covered head to toe in white dust, proudly showing off their homemade lead nickels. Yep, they had accidentally started a full-blown counterfeiting ring. Now, naturally, Robert's educated dad had to gently shut down this incredibly illegal operation and, explain federal law to them. But, and this is just a beautiful parenting moment, he actually praised their immense initiative. He looked at them and said, "You're only poor if you give up. The most important thing is that you actually did something." He then advised them that if they really truly wanted to learn how to make real money, they needed to go ask Mike's dad, the soon-to-be rich dad, for some real advice. Which brings us to part 4, the 10-cent lesson. So the boys finally secure a sit-down with Mike's super busy father. Rich dad agrees to teach them, but he lays down a pretty brutal condition. He absolutely refuses to do it classroom style. Instead, he offers them a meager 10 cents an hour to spend their beautiful, sunny Hawaiian Saturday mornings painfully dusting canned goods in one of his convenience stores. And keep in mind, these stores had zero air conditioning, and the doors had to stay wide open to the dusty road outside. Just brutal. After 3 agonizing weeks of choking on dust and sacrificing his precious baseball games for a whopping 30 cents a week, Robert was completely fed up. He felt the deep, agonizing frustration of a totally exploited employee. He was trapped in the daily grind, trading his precious time for literal pennies, and he was absolutely ready to quit. He felt like he'd been completely set up. I mean, Rich Dad hadn't spoken a single word of instruction to him since the day he started.
Part 5. Stop blaming, start learning.
Furious, Robert marched right up to Rich Dad, demanding a raise and essentially accusing him of being a crook who hadn't taught him a single thing. Rich Dad, he just smiled and said, "Wow, in less than a month you sound exactly like most of my employees." He calmly explained that paying them pennies wasn't a punishment. It was a deliberate lesson. He didn't want to lecture them in a comfy chair. He wanted to give them a harsh taste of real life. And life, he explained, teaches by pushing you around. Each push is basically life saying, "Hey, wake up. There's something here I want you to learn." So the really crucial takeaway here is that when you're faced with financial hardship, low pay, or just a really tough job, you have a choice in how you react. People generally fall into one of 3 camps when life pushes them. Number 1, they just give up, play it safe, and let life push them into submission. Number 2, they get angry and they push back, but they push back blindly at their boss or their spouse or their job, always just chasing that next tiny raise. Or number 3, they actually welcome the push. They look at the situation, realize there is a vital lesson to be learned, they learn it, and they move on. And this builds into a massive psychological breakthrough. Rich Dad taught Robert that as long as you blame your boss, your pay, or your job for your lack of money, you are going to be trapped forever. True power comes from looking in the mirror. If you realize you are the problem, well, then you can actually change yourself, learn something, and grow wiser. Let's be honest, changing yourself is always infinitely easier than trying to change everyone else around you. This fiery little interaction completely cemented the absolute core philosophy of wealth building. It is the defining line that separates the 2 dads. As Rich Dad put it, the poor and the middle class spend their entire lives motivated by fear and desire, working tirelessly for money. But the rich, they step back, they learn how the game is actually played, and they figure out how to have money work for them. Understanding that fundamental difference is the very first step out of the rat race. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to consider about your own journey today. When you look at your paycheck and your bank account, which mindset are you really bringing to the table? Are you letting life push you into submission while settling for the comfortable illusion of job security? Or are you finally ready to wake your brain up, stop saying, "I can't afford it," and learn how to make your money work for you?